to them why they made a commitment to them, and then didn't follow through. And one of the things that's interesting is that people who agree or don't agree with the president in terms of his legislative agenda at least give him high marks, regardless of whether or not they subscribe to his agenda, for keeping his word and his promises. And I think that's one of the things that he's made very clear this morning. We pledged to the American people at the congressional level, at the Senate level, at the federal, at the presidential level, to go do something. And this bill, while it probably not everybody gets everything they wanted, does exactly what we said. It's repealing it and replacing it with all of the principles and the aspects that we discussed throughout not only last cycle, but in a lot of these cases back through 2010. Margaret.
Will he campaign against those Republicans?
Let's get through the vote. I think one of the things that he made clear this morning was that he was going to make sure that the people who did support this, he would be out there supporting them. And so I'm not going to focus on the negative as much as the positive today. And he made it clear to members that for those of you who go out there and keep your word and support it, we're going to make sure that we remember those who stood by us and who stood by the word that they gave to their voters. Margaret.
Hey, okay, so I was actually, that's what I was going to ask, but let me try.
Oh.
No, it's okay, I've got another one. Don't worry. So my other one, but I'm going to go back to that, is on the laptop restrictions by the U.S. and now the U.K. It certainly sounds like that may have been in response to some kind of a specific security threat. What can you talk about from the podium in as much specificity as you can, and if you can't do specifics, at least help us to understand, are there multiple threats? Is there one threat? Are there multiple, like, what is going on here?
So yesterday the TSA announced new enhanced measures on flights inbound to the United States from 10 of more than the 250 countries that have flights coming into the United States that serve as the last point of departure. I think even ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, who we've not always shared the same point of view with, even agreed by saying, quote, these steps are both necessary and proportional to the threat. Elevated intelligence that we're aware of indicates that terrorist groups continue to target commercial aviation and are aggressive in pursuing innovative methods to undertake their attacks, to include smuggling of explosive devices and various consumer objects. Based on this information, the Secretary of Homeland Security and the TSA administrator have determined that it is necessary to enhance security procedures for passengers at certain last point of departure airports. That being said, I'm not going to go any further than that, and I would refer any further comment to the TSA.
Can I try what I was going to try earlier then? Mark Meadows seems like a nice guy, and the president seemed like he was kind of joking, but has the president decided in his own mind yet whether he thinks it would be appropriate, potentially, to mount primary opposition, campaign for primary opposition in Republican congressional primaries in the midterms?
Mark Meadows is a long-time early supporter of the president. He had some fun at his expense this morning during the conference meeting, and I think he continued to express hope that Congressman Meadows, who's the head of the Freedom Caucus, would continue to see the efforts that have been made to make this better, more, and address a lot of the concerns out there. But he has made it very clear that he was having fun with him. The president's committed to making sure that this gets passed. We'll go from there. Vivian.
Thanks, John. First, a follow-up to Margaret's question. Why wait for the new aviation regulations 96 hours to implement it? I mean, isn't the president's mantra on counterterrorism that we have to, kind of sneak up on our enemies, not let them know our tactics?
So I'm going to ultimately refer you back to TSA, but I will tell you that remember that these are 10 airports of last point of departure to the United States out of 250 that come here. Part of it is to allow, you have to provide appropriate notification to the host country, to the host airlines, and give them opportunity to get those procedures in place. I'm not going to comment any further about the security measures that have been taking place or are taking place, just to continue to refer you back to TSA. But I will tell you that I think that implementing something of this nature in that time frame is pretty darn quick.
Okay, one more, sorry,
of course.
Follow-up, sorry. Something totally unrelated. I wanted to ask, has the White House counsel approved Ivanka Trump getting a West Wing office and clearance. And so what is the administration's thinking behind this? What is she going to do?
I don't think the council actually approves office space, but I get your question. Right. Ivanka has taken on several measures to promote high standards of ethical conduct. Even though she's not a federal employee, she'll follow the restrictions that would apply if she were. Mm-hmm. She's taken these steps with the advice of counsel and in consultation with the Office of Government Ethics. Hallie.
Sean, two quick ones for you. One on healthcare to follow up on the follow-ups. You made very clear that the president was going to be supporting those who supported the bill. And I know you don't want to talk about the flip side of the coin, but when he talked this morning in the closed-door meeting about people paying a price, losing seats, not getting majority, is that an implied threat from the president to these members who don't back this bill?
No, I think it's a political reality. I think if you go out and promise the American people something and your voters something, especially on a scale like this, and frankly, as I said, I mean, there's obviously members that have been there 1 term, 2 terms, 3 terms, but this is something that as a party we've made very clear, if you give us this, American people, we will get this done. And I think that to go and make a promise of and a pledge of this magnitude and not to follow it through, I'm sure that voters would be upset, and we've seen this in the past. I think and it's something that I think the president, as I mentioned earlier, has staked, has earned high marks for, is keeping his word. And I think the president was stating a political reality. If we go out there and make these pledges to the American people and don't do what we said we've done on these big things, then I don't think they're going to continue to want to see us in the majority, and they're going to look for an alternative.
And so the second, just to follow, will he remember the names of those who don't back the bill?
We'll see. John Gizzi.
Well, actually, I do have a second actual topic. I just want to follow quickly on yesterday. I just want to clarify
I love your
that.
counting. It's like CBO. Sorry, CBO. Come on, that was...
Can you elaborate on that one?
No, I don't. Go ahead.
I do want to ask about the Russia testimony from yesterday. I know you obviously addressed it from the podium 24 hours ago, but there was sort of this interesting moment that happened a little bit after the briefing where Director Comey was asked about sort of live tweets coming from the president and his account at the same time that the hearing was happening, and Director Comey was fact-checking the president in real time, essentially saying he was incorrect in what he was tweeting. Is there concern on the part of the White House about the president's credibility in that situation, that his own director is correcting his tweets and what he's saying in real time like that?
Well, I mean, let's just be clear. I mean, he was answering questions. I mean, it's not like he was out there. He was responding to a question. But I think it's important to note with respect to this that and I saw a couple comments yesterday. Senator Coons took issue with a couple of the comments that we made. Let me just read to you. I know you guys love this when I do this, so I'm just going to entertain you for a second. Senator Chris Coons, this is his quote, direct quote. Quote, I have no hard evidence of collusion, end quote. Director Clapper, quote, not to my knowledge, end quote. Senator Tom Cotton, quote, not that I've seen and not that I'm aware of. This is in reference to any type of collusion with Russia that occurred. Obama CIA Director, Acting CIA Director Morell, quote, there's smoke but there's no fire. Senator Chuck Grassley, after the Comey briefing, Doc, I can say at POTUS and at Clapper are both right. No evidence of Trump collusion with the So, we've now gone over this on multiple occasions, but at some point there is a distinction between an investigation that it goes into Russia's involvement in 2016 and this continued narrative that falsely tries to link the president or the White House into any of it. They continue to see that there is nothing there. Every single person who has been briefed, who has come out and publicly talked about it, Republican, Democrat, former DNI, former CIA directors, Obama appointees, have said no evidence. And so I get that we keep getting asked, but I mean, my point is that was one of the tweets, though, that he addressed. Is it said, former DNI continues to know, and that was actually true. These are their quotes. This is what they've said. So it's not a question, I think sometimes you come back to us. At some point, the question has to be to the individuals who've said this, to whether it's Chris Coons from Delaware or former Director Clapper or former CIA Acting Director Morell. They're the ones who've said these things on the record. They're the ones who've been briefed by the intelligence community, by the FBI, and come out and said there is no collusion. And so at some point to fact-check the president for merely quoting them is not, the question should be directed at them, not us. But over and over again, it's come to the same conclusion. So, Caitlin.
Hey, John.
All right, John. Then Caitlin. That was very nice of you. It's National Ag Day afterwards.
Go ahead. All right. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Caitlin. Okay. I have two questions. First, the author David Horowitz, in his book, The Big Agenda, writes of what he calls, quote, a deep state, end of quote, in which he said these are Obama holdovers in government who are trying to undercut the president's agenda. This has been widely repeated on social media. Does the president himself believe in this deep state?
Well, I've been asked this question before, and I'll give you the same answer I've given before, which is I think there are people that burrow into the government after an administration. This is going back since the beginning of time. They used to call it ram specking. It's suddenly no longer permitted, but in terms of that same way. But this has been going on since the country came to be, where people burrow in after an administration into a civil servant job. But sure, that there's people after 8 years of Obama that found their way into government, so it should be no huge secret. Okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Another question on...
Ram specking?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Google it.
I remember ram. I remember when...
Have you ever seen my spelling? Come on. Ram specking. It was named after a form. I mean, we're going to go through a history lesson here, guys. Thank you.
Right. My other question was, over the weekend, Governor Graco Ramirez, the head of the Mexican Governors Association, was again in Washington, and in a much publicized statement said that Mexico had scored its first victory over the proposed wall. He said that in the president's budget there's a line item for $2.6 billion
in FY18
in tax dollars, and no mention of Mexico paying for the wall in any way. He's claimed a victory in that. Your response to Governor Graco Ramirez?
It's a little early to be claiming victory. I think the president's made it clear that that he was going to use the current process to start the construction of the wall, and that there would be ways that fulfillment of that pledge would come through. Caitlin.
The administration and the president have repeatedly said that over the next few weeks they will present evidence that he was wiretapped. And last week he said it would be coming this week and he may speak on it this week. Can we expect the president to this week present evidence that he was wiretapped by Barack Obama, or will he speak about it? Because he didn't mention it last night in his rally in Kentucky.
Right. Well, let's see how the week goes. Margaret.
Sean, when we've heard from the president before talk about the need for this health care plan to pass, he's talked about the importance next of tax reform and the rest. At what point do you think that this agenda could be imperiled as you look at the vote count? Because you are also going to have a further fight, of course, to get any of this through the Senate.
Sorry, so at what point will the vote count?
This seems to be such a centerpiece of the rest of the president's agenda. So given that it's still not there's no certainty in terms of passage at this point, I mean, how concerned are you that Thursday could imperil the president's agenda?
Well, I think the president's visit this morning was very well received. I think we continue down the path to get the votes. We got a ways to go. We got to get to the Senate next. But I think members understand that this is something that has been at the heart of what Republicans have campaigned on. And I feel very good headed into this. The president continues to talk to members, and we're going to make sure that we grow the vote as much as we can. But with respect to the rest of the agenda, I think all of the issues that the president campaigned on are things that the House and the Senate both look forward to taking up. There's, whether it's trade or immigration or comprehensive tax reform, all of these issues are stuff that many Republicans have campaigned on for a long time and are eager to get going. The president's made it very clear, as he did last night as well, that, look, part of we've got to keep moving along if we want to get big things done. There's a lot that can get done during this administration, during the first term, and he wants to get as much of it done as possible. And so the quicker we get repeal and replace done and put the American Health Care Act in place, the better. And that's just the nature of it is. But I think when you look at the speed in which we've moved, it's been very responsible. We've allowed the committees to do their will. The House has taken up the amendments. It's been online. So this is, I think there's always a balance between jamming it down and getting it done and over with, which is how the Democrats operated at one point when they legislated, when they finally moved on their bill, versus how this is done. But I think we've struck in a very nice balance on this.
At which point will it be Trump era? The president said today it could happen. We asked during the voters'
We'll have to see. Right now, it's the American Health Care Act, and we're trying to get it done. Anita.
Two questions. First, the Kansas legislature is on the verge of possibly passing a Medicaid expansion, and the current version of the health care bill does not allow states to pass that. And so I'm wondering, as you know, most legislatures are currently meeting across the country. Will there be an exception for states if they expand before any new bill comes
it would be addressed in the legislation. I don't believe there's an exception clause. So I don't, but I also don't, it would be far be it for me to say at this point. I mean, the bill's getting ready to move to the House. The legislature is meeting. I don't want to prejudge the outcome yet, but I don't believe, from my understanding, that there's any kind of like clause that says if.
And then secondly, tomorrow you mentioned the Congressional Black Caucus. Is there a specific topic, healthcare, 5 topics? What can you tell us about the president's message to them, and how did it come about? I know there's been some back and forth on getting a meeting going. How did that come about?
April's about to. Okay, don't drag April into this.
Don't say a name. Don't say a name.
This has been something that the president has talked about for a while. He met with Congressman Elijah Cummings. He started off in a phone call probably a month or so ago where they discussed prescription drugs and the need to get it down, and then the conversation continued. Our legislative affairs team early on went to some of their meetings and started having a dialogue with them. And that dialogue continued, and there was a desire to have a meeting. The president wanted to have them down. I think there's going to be a range of issues that get discussed that range from drug prices to infrastructure investment and education, HBCUs. There'll be a range, and I think that's part of it. There's no set agenda to say we must talk about these things, and obviously I think healthcare is going to come up too. The president wants to get their idea before April jumps out of her seat. I'll give her.
Thank you for giving me a follow-up. I want to follow up on the CDC, and I have another question on another subject. So with the CDC, since you're saying you went through all of this prior to the fact that you became president, there was an effort to reach out to the CDC. So with all of this understanding that they are an important group to deal with in handling some of the issues, the urban issues, or issues that pertain to their community, how does the president plan to move forward in working with them, particularly as some just don't see eye to eye with him?
I think part of this is it continues to have a dialogue, April. I mean, it's simply sitting down with people, talking about issues, talking about common ground. I think if you look at the conversation that he began and continued with Congressman Elijah Cummings, they found common ground. The president talked about areas where, despite some of the narratives that are out there, there were issues that they probably both share a concern for, and that they can work on together. And maybe they won't agree on 100% or 60%, but maybe there's 15, 20, or 30% of the issues. Maybe there's one bill in particular that they can work on. But there's a willingness to sit down and talk, and I think that's the first step in the process of any of these. It's not just your own party, and the president's shown this on several of these meetings, where it's not just business leaders. He's brought in the union leaders. Talked about healthcare yesterday. He had Dr. Zeke Emanuel in. It's not about just bringing in people who agree with you. It's about people across the spectrum who can offer ideas. And the president's, you know, and I get it that inner cities aren't exclusive. The rebuilding of inner cities aren't the only issue. But he's talked about, he's elevated the status of historically black colleges and universities, bringing that office into the White House to help coordinate some of the federal government activities. He's talked about rebuilding the inner cities. He's talked about school choice. A lot of issues that law and order and health care. And there's issues that impact urban areas, minority communities, whether they live in rural areas or urban areas. But I think that dialogue needs to continue because it can only help, and I think that's what we look forward to tomorrow.
And the second subject, as you're talking about bringing in groups, you're also bringing in the truckers, and there is a concern in the trucking industry about something called e-logs. It's going to happen at the end of the year where truckers, be it truckers with commercial trucks or mom and pop businesses, all of them are going to have computers to log in to monitor the time you drive, the stop and speed, etc. And many people are saying that it cuts into their income. Where does the president stand on that? And I know he's meeting about
I think let's see if that comes up in the meeting, and then I'll read out. But I know, I understand that's more of a DOT issue, so I would refer you to the Department of Transportation.
They're very concerned about it. Would he at least?
I understand that, and I hope that comes up. Jeff Mason.
Sean, a follow-up on the DHS airline issue. If there's a danger to Americans or to flyers generally with having laptops or things that are bigger than a cell phone in planes from those 10 countries, why would that not also be a danger from other countries?
As you can imagine, I can't talk about the intelligence that we have. I can just tell you that the steps that are being taken are appropriate, commensurate with the intelligence that we have, and then refer you to the Department of Homeland Security and specifically the Transportation Security Administration.
Okay, one other question that's
you
not
got everyone
related
out
to
too.
that. Okay. Presidents traditionally issue a greeting to those celebrating the Iranian New Year, Nowruz. Will President Trump be doing that today?
Let me get back to you. I know that I don't want to get ahead of myself on that, but we may have something for you later. I've got to check on that. But thank you guys very much. Let's get back to watching Neil Gorsuch, and I will see you tomorrow. We're going to have a week full of briefings. I'm excited. And by the way, I am very happy that the individual in the press corps who took Tom Brady's jersey, that has been returned properly. Another bat on the press, but we have righted that wrong. Thank you.